Great. All right. So another day, obviously, mini camp here. 2 in a row, which is, we're always trying to look for improvement here going into the second day. Still a heavy third down day for us. We'll expand our third down, situational awareness here into a little bit of third and longer situations. So you guys will see some of that out in the field, building as we go through practice from the individuals to the group work. Definitely saw a lot of, I would say, individual group kind of offense versus defense sort of periods where we break the game down. So it's not always 11 on 11. It's maybe 5 on 4, or it's a 4 on 3 drill, something where we can really kind of teach the fundamentals and the basics for those particular areas without coaching the entire 11 on 11 set, and we get a lot of reps and a lot of work done. So we'll continue a lot of that today. A lot of transitions in practice, like I spoke about yesterday, trying to get ready for the game and the game-like type of mentality where, we're just going from offense, first, second, third down, defense, first, second, third down, special teams mixed in between. Sometimes it's longer drives, sometimes it's shorter drives. Working back and forth in between those group periods, and then obviously transition into different places on the field based on, the outline of practice. So a lot of good work from that aspect of it. The guys are working hard. It's camp, so it's going to be demanding. We're trying to increase our amount of time on the field as we build towards training camp. So we've increased since the normal OTA kind of requirement, and then we build towards, what we're allowed here in minicamp as far as on-field time, and that'll increase again when we get to training camp. So it's all a build process as we go through the different phases and then work towards summer camp. So, okay.
About your tight ends, you've got a lot of scrutiny on them. Just what do you try through the OTAs and minicamp? What do you want to get done with that group, regardless of who plays where?
Sure. It's the same for all groups, right? All the groups out there got to improve. They got to learn. I would say, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where we're learning a little bit of a different scheme, different vernacular, different terminology. So being able to operate and adjust and get lined up and get better. It's a lot of individual kind of evaluation, individual improvement is the biggest thing for us. And then, as we work together offensively, those groups working with the offensive line, there's some crossover things that they need to do there, along with, the passing game, the quarterback, the communication, building up that kind of relationship between the quarterbacks and the skill players is important for us from that standpoint too. So, I think all the groups are into the same kind of guidelines of just trying to get better every single day, improve, learn something, that they didn't know the day before. And then definitely building on what we did, previously. There's not a lot of time in the off season. There's not a lot of time in the spring. So we can't really go back and redo. It's, it's got to be right the first time, and that's what we expect it to be at this time of year. So I think everybody kind of, understands that's where we're at with all the groups.
What sort of things, talking about third and long, working on third and long today, are you trying to put in specific plays? Are you trying to get looks? What sort of things are you looking for?
It's really the number one thing we'll try to teach as we go through, the different phases of the game is awareness. What are the different types of things or different types of plays or areas of the field that are attacked in these situations. So generally it's a big awareness thing. It'll always go back to, the fundamental skill sets that are needed in that down and distance or that particular situation. And then there's a scheme element too that we'll install and try to practice and rep and work against each other from an offensive defense perspective to evaluate. But really when we're looking at it, it's a lot of, technique work that we got to get down. There's just a difference when the timing of the plays on third down, if it's third and shorter versus third and longer, what's the marriage of rushing coverage right there? How long does the play take? What's the technique of the players that are in coverage? What's the technique of the guys that are in the rush? The timing of the offensive play affects that. What's the rhythm of the quarterback? What's the rhythm of the routes? What are the different plays? There'll be a lot of conversation here throughout the league, popular plays and shorter down and distances of third down, a lot of picks and rubs. And then you can get into some different avenues there where there's just so much coaching that's involved. The same is true in the longer situations. They all have little different points of emphasis that regardless of the play or the scheme that need to be understood before you can really kind of master the situation.
Like Chris and I were kind of on the same wavelength here. The situational football, then you're saying, is also essentially fundamental work.
Yeah, definitely. So, certainly a situation where your fundamentals might change based on where you are on the field or based on the down and distance. So there's little keys or tips or tendencies that we look at that we'll talk about that say, hey, if you see this, we're going to play it this way, or we're going to run this play. So those are things that all kind of go in, but they're fundamental skills that we need to make sure we master, because you'll pick and choose that, the different tools from the toolbox when you need them, and you just have to recognize the situation first and then go and grab the right tool that you need.
How big of a jump do you anticipate the team making after minicamp?
Sure. You know what? It's hard to tell, right? It's hard to tell all that stuff. You know, we're just trying to improve every single day we're here. It's always great when you're in rhythm and you're kind of have that every single day mentality that you're in the building. You know, certainly when you have a little bit of a break in the action, let's say from the spring until we come back for summer camp, you know, you hope you can pick up where you left off. That's not always, you know, it's not always factual. You know, sometimes that doesn't happen, but you know, it's on all of us to try to do that and achieve that and expect that. You know, that's what we expect when we come back. We have to be able to continue to kind of just keep improving because there's not enough time to go back and redo it. You know, we just don't have that luxury anymore. So the expectation is high for us to be able to come perform. You know, the difference between the spring and training camp, you know, obviously the big part of it is the equipment comes back on. So there's a lot of different learning and teaching that we have to do at that time of year that what we're doing right now particularly has to be mastered by the time we get to that point so that we can transfer into a different area of learning and teaching. Come, Tracy.
In your career about what you were able to do as a coach during off-season workouts and then looking ahead to training camp versus now, what are the biggest changes and what are the challenges those present as a coach?
You know, I mean, obviously it doesn't really matter now, you know, what we used to do from that aspect of it. We just got to maximize our time currently. Certainly, you know, from before, we always worked with the time frame and parameters that we had and maximize all those too. It's always great when, you know, you can have the players in and talk and coach and teach them, and that's, you know, that's what we love to do. So the more we can do that, we love to do that as coaches, and you know, the players love to learn. But you're just working within the parameters of what we have and try to maximize all that time. You know, there's certainly aspects of things that we used to do that were really enjoyable. I think things that were really unique and interesting, you know, back then too. But you know, it's changed, it's moved. We picked up other avenues and ways to do it. Certainly as we go forward, and you know, the whole idea is just try to be as productive as possible through that time. Yep.
Early last year and then continued to play well as you gave him more. What did he do to earn your confidence, I guess, both last year and then going into this year, you know, to be able to be a guy that can compete for a starting job?
You know, I think Tracy last year, and certainly last year is last year, but I think he showed us a lot of growth through the year. He showed us the skill set that he had was probably a little bit more expansive than maybe what we originally thought when we looked at him on film coming out of college. And you know, he was asked to do certain things in college, so we thought we saw some things that potentially he could do, and then to be able to see that live out on the field when he got here kind of reconfirmed some things that we might be able to do with him, which was always good. But you know, that was really kind of last year's fit, you know, from an overall defensive scheme and perspective and personnel. This year is different. You know, everybody's back out there. Everybody, the team has changed, the defense has changed, and the personnel has changed. So, you know, he's out there competing with everybody right now and trying to build on what he did last year. But I think certainly in the NFL, you know, every team starts over every year. There's no carryover from one year to the next. It's all new. So, you know, he's in the same boat with everybody else. You're just trying to learn and get better in all those areas. I got you some.
Oh my, much better than I thought, even though there's no pads. And conversely, is there ever a time where you sit there and say, this guy can't play?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had both through the course of my experience. Certainly guys in minicamp that show up and you're like, wow, I didn't really realize he could, you know, have this skill set or he was able to do this. Or certainly players that you're unfamiliar with, so rookies or guys that are just joining your team from that aspect of it. And you say, wow, this is good. We could use this. We could develop this. We could apply this in a different way. You know, the big question is, does that change, you know, when you get to camp? And that's what you got to find out quickly, because you're not going to also spend as much time maybe on some of the details of the mental part that you had time to do in the spring. And now we're transferring into a physical part with the pads and the rest of it. So it's kind of a tricky balance there. Certainly you always kind of just keep it moderate, you know, and say, we never get too high, we never get too low. I mean, the game's got to be consistent. If you ride the emotional roller coaster of the game, you're not going to be where you want to be because you're not focusing on the details of improving. So I think for us, I've seen that. I've seen guys in the spring that you're like, wow, this looks really good. And then you come to training camp and you're kind of like, oh, this disappeared, you know, and you try to, you know, as a coach, you're figuring out why, you know, how do I get it back? And that's the whole goal. And that's what you got to do. And definitely have seen players through the course of the years where in the spring didn't really show you what you were looking for. And then, you know, the pads come on and you get into more game type of situations and it really kind of blossoms. Sometimes a lot of players, it's maybe that one play or two plays where the confidence light kicks on and now all of a sudden the confidence level is high. They've actually learned the skill set they didn't realize and they're able to go perform that at a high level. But it's also a course where as we build the learning of the game of football, right? The game of football is so complex, and we break it down in different stages. And as we learn, like week 1, I explained the red area. Week 2 was early downs. Week 3 right now is third down. We're going to expand that into more situations and more areas of the game. So as you build that through the spring and then through training camp, those players might show up in training camp because they've had a chance to put it all together. And that's where it's really, that's where it becomes exciting from that standpoint. We had a couple back to back. Yep.
This offseason, I'm just curious if you could explain the upside or what you like about running multiple tight end packages, being able to put 2 guys out there.
Sure. You know what? I mean, the thing about it is we run multiple tight ends, multiple wide receivers, multiple backs. We'll run, 5 wides. We'll run whatever we have to do. So I think right now some of that stuff may look one way. It may not be that way. We might have guys out there that are just in positions that might be in a different personnel than actually is on the field just because of where we're at from a standpoint of practice. So I wouldn't really look too deep into kind of like, hey, this is what it is or this is what it looks like. Right now it's an evaluation, communication, fundamental teaching camp. That's what we're in. We're not in a contact camp. We're not in any of that aspect of it. We're not in a big scheme situation where we're just dumping a bunch of scheme out in the field either. It's just trying to evaluate the players that we have. And that's the biggest challenge for us that every team's facing right now in the NFL. You have to evaluate the guys that are here and can they help you and can they get better and what, do they do well and what don't they? So that's really the point of it, I would say. I'm coming back to Mike. Yep.
Maybe rephrasing it then, what is your evaluation at this point of what you got at tight end? Obviously, it was a disappointment last year. You've made a lot of changes at that position
Sure.
this year. What is your
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, disappointment is just last year in general, right? So it's not really one group or any particular thing. It's going to start with me. So we got to get better all the way across the board. But I would say in general, the guys that are here are working really hard. And the tight end group, just like a lot of the, the groups on the team right now, are improving. They're learning. They're getting better. And, that's exciting. It's a very competitive group, and that's all you're looking for from that standpoint. Last one here, Mike.
Just so much you're almost fully through your second off season now. Is there one thing that you look at now and you're like, wow, that's way easier for me this time around than?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I don't know if I can really answer that right now. I mean, there's probably something in there that has just kind of gone by that I probably spent a lot of time on last year that, this year kind of was second nature from that aspect of it. But I think for me, just trying to be completely better all the way across the board, I'm probably attacking every aspect and every detail and going through it and saying, all right, how do we make this better? How do we adjust this? Probably the flow of the day is probably easier for everybody just to understand, when you kind of come in and you change things, hopefully for the better. And you're the only one that's really gone through that before. You're kind of like the lone soldier out there trying to, guide the flow of the day. And now we have a lot more, guys that are obviously have gone through it that kind of push everybody in the right direction. So you don't have to kind of, point everybody as much.
You're leaning more on other guys than maybe like players and such this year, maybe than last
All of
year.
it, the building in general, the whole organization. I think it's just kind of, that groundwork has kind of been laid. I just want to make sure I say this real quick before we break, because then I got to go get ready for practice. But moved practice back 15 minutes here, right? So we're 11:45 start time, just so you guys are aware. We had some weather come through, and again, I think everybody have said this before. I'm trying to make sure we stay on the grass as much as possible here. More space. We got 90 guys. We got all the equipment out there, all that stuff. Be another, obviously, situation where we got to be ready to adapt if we have to go inside, if something happens from that aspect of it. But so that's the delay here for us going out, and then just be ready if we have to transfer inside. We'll switch it and go inside at that point. Okay. All right, appreciate it. Thanks.